there is a specific kind of silence that only exists at 2 in the morning. Not the peaceful kind. Not the kind after a long day when you finally sink into the couch and everything feels still. This is a different silence. It has weight. It presses. And if you have ever found yourself lying awake at that hour, staring at the ceiling while the rest of the world is asleep, having a conversation with yourself that you would never say out loud to another human being, then you already know exactly what I mean. And by the end of this, you will understand why the loneliest conversations you have are not the ones where no one is listening, but the ones where you have stopped listening to yourself. Here is the strange thing about modern life. We have more ways to reach each other than at any other point in human history. You can send a message to someone on the other side of the world in 3 seconds. You can watch someone's life unfold in real time. You can be reachable 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And yet, somehow the rates of loneliness have never been higher. A 2018 report from Cigna found that nearly 46% of Americans reported sometimes or always feeling alone. And that was before a global pandemic rearranged everything. Today, the numbers are worse. Researchers at Harvard published a report in 2021 called Making Caring Common. And in it, they found that 36% of all Americans, including 61% of young adults, reported feeling serious loneliness. Not occasionally lonely, seriously lonely. We are more connected and more alone than ever before. And we treat this as a technology problem, or a social problem, or a scheduling problem. We think, if I just made more plans, replied to more texts, went to more events, maybe I would stop feeling this way. So we reach outward. We scroll, we post, we call, we fill the silence with noise. And for a few minutes, maybe it works. But then, 2 in the morning comes around, and there it is again. The philosopher Blaise Pascal, writing in the 17th century, said something that sounds like it was written last week. He wrote that all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. 300 years later, we are still running from the room. We have just found much faster ways to do it. Here is the paradox at the center of this video. The very thing that feels like it will cure our loneliness, constant connection, constant noise, constant stimulation, is often the thing that makes it worse, because you cannot actually connect with someone else until you have connected with yourself. And most of us have not been alone with ourselves in a very long time. Not truly. Not without a phone, a podcast, a distraction. Not in the way that 2 in the morning sometimes forces on you without warning. And when it does, when the silence finally catches you, what you feel is not peace. It is panic, or grief, or this hollow, aching kind of sadness that you cannot quite name. And the question worth sitting with is why? Why does being alone with yourself feel like a problem to solve rather than a place to rest? Let me tell you about something called the social baseline theory, developed by psychologist James Cohen at the University of Virginia. His research found that the human brain quite literally treats other people as a resource, in the same category as food or oxygen. When we are in close proximity to people we trust, the brain actually reduces its threat response. It spends less energy preparing for danger. But when we are isolated, when we are alone and disconnected, the brain shifts into a higher state of alert. It starts working harder. It starts scanning for threats. It becomes, in a word, exhausted. This is important because it means that loneliness is not just an emotion. It is a physiological state. Your body responds to isolation the same way it responds to pain. Neuroscientist John Cacioppo, who spent decades studying loneliness at the University of Chicago, found that chronic loneliness is associated with elevated levels of cortisol, disrupted sleep, weakened immune function, and even changes in gene expression. He described loneliness as the social equivalent of physical pain. It is a signal. It is your nervous system telling you that something is missing. But here is where it gets complicated, because Cacioppo also found something that most people overlook. Loneliness is not simply about the number of people around you. You can be in a crowded room and feel completely alone. You can be in a marriage, in a family, at a party, surrounded by people who love you, and still feel it. What actually predicts loneliness, he found, is the perceived quality of connection. The sense that you are truly known, that someone sees the whole of you, not just the polished, presentable version. That the gap between who you are in public and who you are at 2 in the morning is not an abyss, but a small, bridgeable space. And that gap, I think, is where the real problem lives. Think of it this way. Imagine you have a drawer, and over the years, you start putting things in it that you do not know what to do with. Complicated feelings, questions you cannot answer, fears that seem too small to mention but too heavy to carry, grief you have not had time to process, things you want but do not know how to ask for. You put them in the drawer because the day is busy and there are things to do and people are counting on you, and it does not feel like the right time. And the drawer fills up, and you get good at keeping it closed. But at 2 in the morning, the drawer opens, not because you chose to open it, but because the noise stopped and there is nothing left to drown it out. And you are suddenly alone in a room with everything you have been avoiding, and it feels unbearable. And you do not understand why something as simple as quiet feels like a threat. This is not a character flaw. This is a consequence of how we have learned to live. There is a study I keep returning to from 2014, conducted by Timothy Wilson and colleagues at the University of Virginia. They put people alone in a room with nothing to do for 15 minutes. No phone, no book, no stimulation, just sitting. And then they gave people the option to give themselves an electric shock rather than continue sitting in silence. 67% of men and 25% of women chose the shock. They chose physical pain over being alone with their thoughts. I find that one of the most quietly devastating findings in all of modern psychology. We would literally hurt ourselves rather than sit with what is inside us. And I am not saying that to judge anyone. I have been there. I have reached for my phone at midnight because the alternative was having to actually feel something I had been postponing. I know what it is to prefer noise to truth, but I also know what happens over time when you keep choosing the shock. The drawer gets heavier, the 2 in the morning gets darker, and the conversations you keep refusing to have with yourself start showing up in other ways. In the way you pull away from people who are getting too close, in the irritability that comes from nowhere, in the way you sometimes feel like a stranger to your own life. So what do we do with this? This is where I want to bring in someone who thought about this more carefully than almost anyone I know of. Viktor Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor who spent years in Nazi concentration camps, including Auschwitz. And in those conditions, stripped of everything external, he came to a conclusion that I think is one of the most radical ideas in the history of psychology. He wrote in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, that the last of the human freedoms is the ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. He called this the freedom of the inner life. And what he observed, both in himself and in others, was that the people who survived, not just physically but psychologically, were the ones who had access to an interior world, who had a relationship with their own inner life that did not depend on external conditions. Now, I am not saying you need to survive Auschwitz to understand loneliness. That would be a grotesque comparison. What I am saying is that Frankl identified something that I think we have largely lost in the modern world: the ability to be with oneself, not as a punishment, not as something you do when there is nothing better available, but as a practice, as a resource. The ancient Stoics had a phrase for this. They called it returning to oneself. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor who wrote privately in his journal without any intention of publishing it, filled those pages with one recurring theme: go inward. Not as an escape from the world, but as the only reliable foundation from which to engage with it. He wrote that the things that happen to you are outside your control. But what you make of them, the meaning you assign, the response you choose, that is yours. And it lives inside you. And if you have never gone there, if you have spent your whole life running from that interior space, then you are, in a very real sense, homeless. You have nowhere to return to when the world gets hard. The psychologist Carl Jung used a different language but said something similar. He wrote about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we have rejected, repressed, or simply never examined. And his central insight was this: what you do not make conscious will appear in your life as fate. In other words, the things you refuse to look at do not disappear. They just run the show from off stage. They show up in your patterns, your reactions, your inexplicable sadness at 2 in the morning. The reframe I want to offer is this: the loneliness you feel is not a symptom of being disconnected from other people. It is a symptom of being disconnected from yourself. And the 2 in the morning conversations, the ones you have been dreading, the ones that feel too uncomfortable to sit with, those are not the problem. They are an invitation. They are your interior life, knocking on the door, asking to be let in. This is a significant shift, because it means the solution is not more social events, more followers, more texts, back and forth. The solution is to become someone you can actually live with, to develop a relationship with your own inner world that is honest and curious and kind. Not because that makes you self-absorbed, but because a person who has done that work, who knows their own mind, who has made peace with their own silence, is paradoxically one of the best people to truly connect with someone else. You cannot give what you do not have. You cannot be truly present with another person if you cannot be present with yourself. The philosopher Martin Buber wrote about 2 fundamental ways of relating to the world. He called them I-it and I-thou. In the I-it mode, you relate to others as objects, as means to an end, as roles rather than people. In the I-thou mode, you relate to someone as a whole person, with full presence, with genuine encounter. And his argument was that real connection, the kind that actually nourishes you, only happens in the I-thou mode. But here is the thing Buber says that most people miss. You cannot enter I-thou with someone else if you have never entered it with yourself. You cannot see another person fully if you have never been willing to see yourself fully. The same drawer that is closed to you is, in a way, closed to everyone else too. So let me offer you 3 things to try. Not assignments, not a 5-step program, just 3 gentle invitations to take with you. The first is this: give yourself 15 minutes this week with no stimulation, no phone, no music, no podcast, just you, sitting in silence. And when the discomfort comes, because it will come, do not reach for something to make it stop. Just notice it. Name it if you can. Is this boredom? Is this anxiety? Is this grief? Is this longing? You do not have to solve it. You just have to be willing to look at it without flinching. This sounds simple. It is not simple, but it is the beginning. The second invitation is to ask yourself honestly, what is in the drawer? What is it that keeps surfacing at 2 in the morning? Not because you need to fix it tonight, but because naming it, even to yourself, even in the dark, changes your relationship to it. There is a concept in psychotherapy called naming to tame. When you put language around an emotion, the emotional intensity of it decreases. The amygdala, the part of your brain that fires up in response to threat, literally quiets down when you name what you are feeling. The act of saying, I am scared, or I am grieving, or I feel like I have lost myself, does not make you weak. It makes you real. And it is harder to run from something you have actually looked at. The third invitation is perhaps the most uncomfortable. Ask yourself this: who in your life have you let actually know you? Not the you that is doing fine, managing well, keeping it together, but the you that has the drawer. The you that sometimes wakes up at 2 in the morning and does not know why, because the research is clear on this. The antidote to loneliness is not more connection. It is deeper connection. And deeper connection requires vulnerability. Not performed vulnerability, Not the kind that is packaged for social media, but the real unglamorous kind where you say something true to someone and you do not know how they will respond. That is the conversation that actually heals. That is the one worth having. I want to be honest with you about something. I do not think there is a way to make the 2 in the morning conversations go away entirely. I do not think that is even the goal. Some of the most important things I have ever understood about myself have come from those hours, from that specific kind of silence that will not let you lie. The goal is not to escape it. The goal is to stop being afraid of it, to learn that you can sit in a room alone and survive it, that the silence is not your enemy, that what lives inside you, even the difficult parts, is worth knowing. Rainer Maria Rilke, the poet, wrote something in his Letters to a Young Poet that I have carried with me for years. He wrote, "I would like to beg you, dear friend, as well as I can, to have patience with everything unresolved in your heart, and to try to love the questions themselves as if they were locked rooms or books written in a very foreign language. Don't search for the answers, which could not be given to you now, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps then, someday far in the future, you will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into the answer. Live the questions. That is the whole thing right there. Not have the answers, not fix the silence, not fill the drawer with something that makes it close more easily. Just be willing to be in it with yourself for long enough to hear what it is actually trying to say. The loneliest conversations happen at 2 in the morning, but they do not have to stay lonely. They can be the beginning of the most important relationship you will ever have, the one with yourself. If this is the kind of conversation you find yourself wanting more of, conversations that take psychology and philosophy seriously and try to make them actually useful for how you live, then subscribing means you will be here for the next one. And I am genuinely curious. What is it that surfaces for you when the noise goes quiet? What is in your drawer that you have not quite been able to name yet? Leave it in the comments if you feel like it. You might be surprised how many people are sitting with the same thing